All right, ladies and gentlemen, what's up? Welcome to episode 9 of Super Metroid Strat Chat. My name is Kipp. I'm one of your hosts. The other host, as you know, is Mr. True Moss. Moss, are you there?
Yeah, hi Kipp.
How are you, man?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's the last night of my spring break, so getting ready to go back to the work grind after a few days off.
Yeah, I'm in the exact same position as you.
Nice. So, did you have a little bit of a case of the Sunday blues today?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, tomorrow's Easter Monday, but my studio actually is open Easter Monday.
Ah,
so
gotcha.
What can you do?
That's cool, man. Well, so ladies and gentlemen, just, to kind of fill you in, we always do this at the start of every episode. Strat Chat is supposed to be, a show that we put on bi-weekly, and what True Moss and I are trying to do is, go over a lot of different strats and things that will help players, not only that are beginning speedrunners, but maybe even have some experience in the game. We just want to try to help everybody out as much as possible and answer a lot of questions, because we've noticed that there's a lot of people, constantly asking questions in Discord and stuff like that. So we both have education backgrounds. We like to give back to the community. So that's pretty much what spawned this thing. And, we always put up our stats at the beginning of every episode during the intro, just to kind of show that we have, a range of experience in all four of the major, no major glitches categories. So if you have any questions about any of those specific categories along the way when we get to the strat portions, feel free to let us know. And if you have any future questions, this is something that True Moss brought up the last couple weeks. If you have any questions that you would like for us to cover, feel free to type them in the chat during the episode, or in the Super Metroid Discord, or in my Discord where we have a Strat Chat channel. So, but for tonight, Moss, we always have a guest interview. Last week we interviewed you to get to know you a little bit better, and then it turns out that looks like tonight it's my turn. So at this point, I'm going to adjust. I think I need to adjust my camera a little bit, and while I'm doing that, you can go ahead and get started with any questions that you have. I'll put up my stats as I do for all people that we interview, and take it away, man.
Okay, great. I'm looking forward to this, man. I like, it's great talking to two other runners, but getting a chance to interview you, it's really, I can't wait.
Well, last week, let me like on that vein, I had a really fun time interviewing you because, the whole reason I even started Twitch to begin with, I wasn't playing Super Metroid. I wasn't even speedrunning anything or playing any game competitively. I just really wanted to play some retro games and just talk about them. I love hearing people talk about their experiences growing up, playing retro games, or how they get into speedrunning. And so I think it's cool. This is pretty much my wheelhouse. This is just sitting around, shooting the breeze with other people talking about video games is the whole reason I even got into Twitch to begin with. So this should be fun.
Yeah. By the way, this new low ice time looks great. Good for you.
Oh, thank you, man. Yeah, I'd been, I think last Saturday or Sunday maybe. Once I made the top 8 in the tournament, I knew that low ice was going to be one of the potential categories, and I hadn't committed any time to it in a while, so started practicing it again. And when I left, I hadn't really achieved a PB that was kind of close to what I could have done, so spent a couple weeks kind of practicing offline a little bit, little by little, derusting a little bit, and then put a week into it, and finally got one of those really kind of everything comes together kind of runs. So
I love those runs.
Yeah, so it was kind of nice, and now I want to keep pushing it down a little bit more. So, but it'll take some work.
Yeah, definitely. Well, congratulations on that, man.
Thank you, dude. Appreciate it.
All right, so last week you started with just starting with gaming, not speedrunning, not Super Metroid, just gaming in general. And I want to start in the same place with you. Where did you first start playing video games, and what was your first big game? And let's start right there. Okay,
so I'm going to give the super background version. When I was growing up, my dad, he eventually became a superintendent, but he was always by the time that I came around, I'm the youngest out of 4, and I think he was at least an assistant superintendent in a school system somewhere, and he was always real big on technology. This was in the 80s, right? So he was always real big on being ahead on trying to get computer labs installed in schools and stuff like that, which did not exist, really at the time very much. And so he bought I want to say like an IBM or like an old Apple computer or whatever, that had like DOS and stuff or whatever back in the day. And so as a kid, that was always around, and I learned how to like, my older brothers and sisters showed me how to put in the floppy disk, like the true floppy disk, and like how to put in commands to load some games. And so I played a few games there, and then we also had an Atari, 2600. Technically there's more than one Atari, but when people say an Atari system, they're usually talking about the 2600.
2600, yeah.
And so I distinctly remember as a kid, 3 years old, couldn't barely do anything, trying to play Asteroids or like Pac-Man or, Space Invaders, and I was just god awful, right? I mean, I couldn't do anything, but I kept trying to do it. And so that's my earliest memory. But then everything changed when I was, I want to say 5. I think I was in kindergarten. And my 2 older brothers decided to go in together to buy a Nintendo, a regular NES, Nintendo Entertainment System. And I distinctly remember, like it was yesterday, we went to Walmart or Sam's or something like that. They bought it. We took it home. They were upstairs. Their bedroom was upstairs, and they were putting it together, and my mom wouldn't let me go up there. She's like, leave them alone. Don't get in their way. And so, like, I couldn't go up there for a couple hours. And then I finally was like, okay, I want to go up there, and she let me. And when I walked up the stairs, I remember hearing the sounds, before I even got there. And the first thing I saw was them playing Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. And I was immediately, like, enamored. Like, this is, like, so cool, right? Like, I'd never seen anything. Like, the graphics were amazing at the time. Yeah. And so, I spent a ton of time watching them play more so than playing myself. But then I started, whenever they weren't playing, I figured out how to turn it on and stuff, and I started playing. And, man, I must have lost to Glass Joe. I mean, and don't forget, I mean, I know it sounds funny, but I was only 5, I must have lost to Glass Joe like 30 times or something before I finally beat him. But eventually, I started getting, decent where I could beat multiple people in Punch-Out. I kept getting further and further. Played Mario Brothers. My brother bought Kung Fu. We had Excite Bike, which I had been playing in Chuck E. Cheese for several years. And that was just kind of like the start of video gaming for me. And like Saturday mornings, I would wake up early when my brothers were still asleep, and I would like sneak up into their room and try to turn the TV on and like cut down the volume really fast so that it wouldn't wake them up and like play. So I grew up playing a ton. And then eventually what really did it for me was when I was in 4th grade, my grandparents bought me a Super Nintendo just for me for Christmas, and they also bought me my first television, an old CRT box television. And so from that point forward, I had a Super Nintendo in my room dedicated to, for me. And to this day, the Super Nintendo is still my favorite system. So that was kind of what got me started on gaming, from a very early age.
That's great. So what's what was the game? What was like the game when you were really young that like you put more time into than any, or like that was the one that like now I play video games. This is what I do because of this.
Well, I guess that's a good question. I guess it just kind of depends on different phases. When I was a kid, the first game that I remember kind of just being like, wow, this is a totally different world, was the original Legend of Zelda. My brothers, I think, rented it or something, and it was just like the game seemed so massive to me and just so complex, And so I spent a lot of time with that game, which was fun. I remember like having computer paper and drawing. When I got to Ganon's Labyrinth eventually, like I got lost for like a long time, and I had to draw my own map to like remember where to go, which took forever. So I had to like draw these little squares, as they fit together like the rooms. And so that was one of the first big games. But then I think another big thing was RPGs. My brother borrowed Dragon Warrior, and that was the first RPG that I'd ever played, and I loved it. Like, I loved the idea of grinding. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It was very relaxing to me. Like, I know now if we went back and played Dragon Warrior or some of those old RPGs, they would just seem kind of taxing. But like I just love spending hours just walking around and like fighting enemies and trying to save up enough gold to get the next weapon or whatever. And so that game was a big one. And then Final Fantasy, the original one, was a huge jump for me. Spent a lot of time on that game. I loved it. And then, I kind of had different games for different systems. But that's kind of where I got started. But I think the first game that I ever felt like I sort of was like pretty decent at was probably a combination of two things. Like in like middle school, my sister and I would play a lot of Mortal Kombat together, and it was very competitive. Like she was actually really good, and neither one of us wanted to lose, so we played a ton of that. And then like Mortal Kombat 2 was the primary one that we played, and when I got into high school and I got a 64, I sunk an insane amount of hours into GoldenEye, which I think is probably the true like. There are other things I did beforehand that would fit kind of where I am now with speedrunning, but I think that's the first game where I was like truly trying to speedrun hardcore because I was trying to get those like cheat codes. You'd have to beat certain levels on Double O Agent or Secret Agent. We've talked about this before, what I'm talking about. And I distinctly remember, and I'd also want to point out that, for anybody who's younger, this was before the internet the internet existed, but it wasn't like this just wealth of knowledge or whatever. Like you couldn't just Google GoldenEye strats or whatever at the time, or at least I didn't know that you could do that, and like there wouldn't just be a bunch of stuff on there, right? There wasn't streaming and stuff like that. And so I figured out how to get I think it's 2 minutes and 5 seconds for facility.
Yeah, somewhere around there. 205.
205, 210, something like that. And I remember like figuring out how to do that completely alone over hours and hours and hours, and that was kind of the start for me of like sort of figuring strats out, you know what I mean, and like trying to play the game in a different way than the casual experience would be. Like I started figuring out how to open doors and then shut them back to like keep guys from getting to me fast enough and stuff. And then I was also introduced to RNG because Dr. Doak would never be where I needed him to be when I was finally like on the run,
Yeah, Dr. Doak is like the best example of RNG.
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
And that's also kind of where I learned the lesson. It's just like you have to execute, and then you have to get lucky too, and that's just kind of the way it is. So all those games combined together to be big games that I sunk a lot of time into. I did other things like Final Fantasy RPGs on Super Nintendo and PlayStation, but I would say those are the big ones.
Yeah, sure. Speaking of GoldenEye, I don't know if you've been watching Goose's his speed lore episodes where he's talking about like the history of a certain level in GoldenEye. He did one last night, and anyway, it's interesting because like Super Metroid has a pretty long history now at this point of what people have been doing and route changes and new strats. But like GoldenEye goes back to like 97, right? Like it goes back. People were doing speedruns way back then, right? So it's definitely worth checking out at some point to plug someone else that's doing a different show from us. But
yeah, that sounds really interesting, actually.
Yeah. All right. So did you you didn't mention Super Metroid when you were talking about your Super Nintendo? Did you play Super Metroid when you were a kid?
So here we go. Okay. I wish if I would have thought about this in advance, I don't know where on earth I would get it, but so yes, I played Super Metroid as a kid and I loved it. For a long time it was like a top 10 favorite game of mine. But let me, I love telling stories. This is part of why I wanted to do Strat Chat with you anyway. It was like when we had the idea of having guest interviews, is because I love hearing like people's history and stuff and how they got into the game. Like my history with Super Metroid goes back even before it came out. I feel like I had a not completely unique experience, but I feel like a very uncommon experience for the time period, because I was one of those people, at my age that had older siblings and had a Nintendo, and we owned the original Metroid. And so, and for the record, if anybody's never played the original Metroid, you should do yourself a favor and at least go play it a little bit, because it hasn't aged well, but at the same time, for the time period, was a really progressive, ambitious concept, right? And it's easy to get lost. Anyway, we owned the game. I played it for hours. I kept getting lost. I would write down the 40 character, code, like continue code or whatever, and then I would accidentally like mess up something, and then I would lose it and have to start over. But I eventually beat the game. Maybe like age 7 or 8. Then I had a Game Boy, and so when Metroid 2 came out, I bought it, or I got it for Christmas or something, and I played all the way through it, got all the items, beat the game, knew the story. So like I was one of those people that when Super Metroid came out, I already knew like the story. Like I had played and defeated like both of the games, and I was only like 10 when it came out. So there probably weren't that many people that had done both of those things. And so like when Super Metroid fires up and they're showing you all the history, like the first time I played it, I was like really like into it because I was like, I recognize that stuff, like this is cool. This is all the cool storylines in 16-bit. But I played it. It came out, I want to say, I'm gonna guess because I don't remember. It's probably like March or April or May, somewhere in that ballpark of '94. And I rented it, played it, loved it. I don't think I beat it the first weekend that I had it, but then I rented it again near the end of May, and I beat it the night that my second brother graduated from high school. So I beat it, and then like I was like in like my little suit and tie or whatever. So I beat it, as we're getting ready to leave, and I was like, oh, this is crazy. Like when I saw the baby Metroid come in, I was like, it was like a big moment. Like I remember being shocked, I was like, I didn't expect it to end this way. So go to the graduation, come back home. It's all I could think about. I wanted to play it again, beat Mother Brain, check out the story again. And so I played it, and from there I played it at least once every maybe 2 years or so, 2 or 3 years. I'd play through it casually, basically from that point until the time that I played it casually that got me into speedrunning it. But I have a really funny picture. One of my best friends in elementary school, his mom worked for Kmart, and she would always be able to get like the video games as they came out or whatever. And so she bought it for him for his birthday, and we were at a spend the night party, and like he got it, and there's this picture of all three of us, like there were 3 of us there at the party, just like completely freaking out while he's holding the game up or whatever. And so like I always think about how that image sort of maybe was a foreshadowing of what was to come.
Yeah. So let's get right in. Let's talk about your speedrunning. Like, how did you first start doing speedrunning? Was Super Metroid your first game, or did you look at other games previously? What's the story on how you got into it?
Okay, so I feel like speedrunning hits me right on the head, like as in general, as a person, because I was that kid that was like trying to figure out like if I was going to change the channel on the remote, I was trying to figure out the least number of buttons. And like for example, I'm not even kidding, like I remember being at like age 7 or 8 and figuring out that like if I wanted to heat something up in the microwave for a minute and 30 seconds, I could just type 90 instead of 130, and that was one less button, right? And so like I was like, I know that sounds weird, but I've just always constantly my whole life for some reason tried to figure out how to do things like maybe not faster necessarily, but efficiently, right? Exactly.
Yeah. That actually, I know exactly that feeling. Kind of the same way.
Yeah. And I'd be kind of surprised if a lot of the speedrunners out there, that like sunk a lot of time into the game or this game or any other, I'd be kind of surprised that they weren't kind of like that too, So anyway, that I've always kind of had that mindset, but I remember, other than GoldenEye, the first game that I was trying to not really speed run like seriously, because I didn't know anything about glitches or anything, right? I every game I came across, I just played it straight up because I didn't know any better, right? I remember trying to beat Final Fantasy 1, not on regular Nintendo, but on like the eventual PlayStation remake and the Game Boy Advance remake, where they put in the magic system of like the later on Super Nintendo games or whatever. I remember trying to beat that in under 4 hours. And I don't think I ever did it. I think the closest I got was like 4 hours and 2 minutes or something. But that was with like, literally knowing nothing about anything other than just my experience with the game and just trying to go as quickly as I could and like knowing when I needed to be what level. And one of the ways that I figured out how to do it was, have you ever played Final Fantasy 1?
No, I haven't played Final Fantasy 1. No.
So basically you have, like, the game works this way. You have 4 people in your party the entire game, and at the beginning there are 6 different characters that you can have. Like, there's a fighter, a white mage, a black mage, so on and so forth, and you can have as many or as few of any of them as you want. You get to customize your party. And so one thing I figured out to do to go faster and to get stronger was I would have a 3-person group, and I would immediately let the 4th person die so that the XP would get dumped into the other characters faster. Yeah. And I figured out that let me go faster. And so, I did that, and that was like, kind of fun for me, because I ran the game a bunch of times trying to figure out how to do it. Then I started trying to figure out how could I challenge myself to beat the game in a different way. Like, for example, I beat it with all white mages, which was like technically the sort of weakest character, And then I did it another time where I tried to beat it with just one character. Like, that was the most fun I ever had, was like trying to figure out, how can I beat this game from the very beginning by killing the rest of the 3 people off at the very start and then only having one person. And the funny thing is the first person I selected to do it was a black mage, and I got all the way to the final boss. It took forever, and then I realized at the final boss that I wasn't going to be able to do it. Like, the stats just wouldn't line up or whatever, so I had to re-roll with a different character and do it all again, and I finally did it. And so I think, like, that was sort of my introduction to challenge running. And so basically, I just kept playing games. I kept trying to do certain things as I got older. Like, I was trying to beat Legend of Zelda 2 without using a continue, which is a hard game. And, I didn't see anybody doing videos on it. I just played it on my own. So eventually I did that. And then I think probably the thing that got me directly into Super Metroid was right before I played Super Metroid, I was doing a little bit of Super Mario Maker. And I made a point to go on. I started realizing, like, oh, you can set world records in this thing. Like, it tracks every single person that has played these levels, and it tracks their times. And, if you get a world record, your name will show up. And so I started, like, finding certain ones and trying to set world records. And then there's a guy named Pro Jared who's, he's a big YouTube guy. And he made 8 levels on Super Mario Maker. And every single one of them had been played, like, at least, like, some of them were like 100,000 times or something, or maybe like 50. Like, it was basically like, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70,000 times each they had all been played, right? And so I made a point to try to beat one of them and get the world record on it. I was like, it'd be kind of cool if I, like, sat down and figured this level out and got a world record on it, considering how many times it's been played. And it took me a long time, but I eventually got it. And then I got motivated, and I was like, screw this, I'm going to get all of them. So I got all 8 of them. It took a while, and then somebody came in on 2 different ones and, like, beat my time later. But then I was like, no way, right? So I went back and, like, figured out a way to go a little bit faster. And I'm sure Peach, if she's around, could talk about this. Like, I've mentioned before that Peach has been around for Twitch for me. Like, she's literally been, like, there was like a year and a half where, like, the only person that ever hung out in my channel was Peach. So if she's here right now, she'll probably remember watching me do a lot of this Super Mario Maker stuff. But I got all 8 of those. I decided to run through some of the other boards that I found and get world records. And that kind of got me, like, thinking as a speedrunner for, like, these kind of games. And then I just played Super Metroid casually on the side when I was doing some Heroes of the Storm competitively. And I don't know, man. I didn't even see a video, really in terms of, like, a tutorial. Like, I think I was watching Oats and Goats a little bit when he was going for the world record in 80%. Mm-hmm. And I just was like, oh, man, that looks awesome. I remember watching one of the races on GDQ. I was like, man, these guys are doing something with Super Metroid that I wouldn't have even thought possible. Like, this is amazing. And so it made me want to play casually. Well, I played it casually, beat it in, like, 8 hours. And then I was like, well, if I pulled up a map, like, I wonder if I could beat it in, like, 5 hours, And then one thing leads to another. You discover more information. You figure more things out. You sink hundreds and then thousands of hours into the game. And, well, here we are.
So can you pinpoint like with a moment where you got the bug, where you got the Super Metroid bug? Do you have like a moment where you're like, oh man, this is it. I'm doing this thing now.
Yeah, so there were two things basically. Seeing the race between Oats, Sweet Gnome, Zost, and Behemoth, where I think Behemoth ended up winning and all the other three guys died.
Yeah.
Like that was sort of the seed, if you will, because I remember watching it being like, oh man, like I would have never imagined that you could play the game like that. You know what I mean? And I didn't understand what they were doing. I didn't understand.
When you say it like that, do you mean like the boss order essentially, or what do you mean by play like that?
No, basically I didn't understand what they were doing in terms of like the mechanics. Like deboosting and stuff like that. Like it had never occurred to me that you could do something like that in this game. Like I just didn't know the in-depth stuff. Imagine playing the game casually and just not having access to some of the in-depth stuff, right? So I would see him do these things and I'd be like, holy crap, man, this is incredible. And at first it didn't necessarily make me want to do it, but it made me want to play the game again. Like I hadn't played it in a while and I was like, I want to go play Super Metroid. I watched some of Oat's streams really casually because he was streaming early in the day when I was getting ready for work, so I'd watch for like 10, 20 minutes, while I was like brushing my teeth and stuff, getting ready for work. But then I played the game through. It took me like 2 days, I think, 2 streams, and I was doing it casually. And then I just, again, without knowing anything about how to run fast, I was just like, if I get a map out and I actually know where I'm going, how fast can I run this thing, right? And so I ran it in like 4 hours the next time. And then after that, I was like, well, okay, can I cut some more stuff? And then I ran it in 3 hours. And then, I noticed that people started coming into my stream more so than usual. And it was a lot of people from the Super Metroid community, that's one of the beautiful things about the Super Metroid community is that, like, when people are playing the game that are new, everybody's really supportive. Like, I remember Fruit Bat Salad coming in, White Mage Becky came in, Sephi came in, there were other people. And it just kind of like one thing led to another. It was like, oh, well, if you're interested in running fast, like you should check out the Discord. And hey, you should watch this video and learn how to mock ball and blah, 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 blah. And it just kind of like snowballed from there. And so it was like that day where I had beaten it, but then I wanted to play it immediately again. And I wanted to get the map out. And then I saw like, just how big the map was. That was kind of the moment that, I guess, the point of no return, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I want to talk a bit about what I kind of think of as the Kipp Super Metroid mantra.
Okay.
Or the philosophy, I guess, in the way that you tend to be playing. Like, the two things that I noticed the most about the way that you stream this game is that, firstly, you like diversify your playing a lot. Like, you're always changing into a different category. Like, Zost has been doing any percent and just doing it over and over again forever. Oats is now doing Hundo, and he's just been essentially just playing Hundo. Like, I do the same thing. I figure one route, and I'm spending that, months doing that. But I notice, like, every time I'm in your channel, you got something new that you're working on. And the other thing that I notice that you do a lot is your, like, less resets, longer runs than most people, for the most part. Like, you'll just, mistakes and all, you'll just kind of keep pushing through your runs. So I kind of wanted to talk a bit about just that part of like the philosophy of Kipp's playing.
Okay. Yeah, so before I kind of go into this, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard me talk about it, like people that watch my stream, they've probably heard me say some of these things before, but so a couple things. I don't expect anybody to necessarily agree with me. Everybody can approach this game in any level or any philosophy they want. I'm just saying what I do and what has worked for me and how I've sort of found success because, everybody plays for fun, but for me personally, I've always been a very competitive person, and I'm not really competitive versus another person. I'm just really competitive with myself. You know what I'm saying? Like, when I see other people doing cool things and like doing things that I can't do, I don't get jealous or upset about that. I get excited, like, oh man, like look what they're able to do. You know, like I need to study this and figure out, like, is this something that I can do, or can I do a modified version of it or whatever? Like, how can I continue to get better? And I've always been like that about everything that I've done. So first of all, let's talk about the categories. Like, you know, the funny thing is I didn't start that way. From February, I started streaming this game like as a speed run at the beginning of February, basically, of 2017. And from that point all the way through the first week of June, so February, March, April, May, 4 months straight, the only thing I did, period, ever, with Super Metroid was any percent old route. I didn't look into any other category. I didn't do a test run. I didn't do a rando. I didn't do a single thing other than what can I do to keep pushing my 80% time down. And my initial goal, and you'll remember this, Moss, because you helped me. I like recruited you to help make a video for me about some things I could do when I was in that like 50-51 range. And I was like, you know, I'm not going to do anything else until I get a sub 50 time, because to me that was a very important milestone, and I thought that it would be easier for me to transition to other categories later if I had the skill set that would be required to at least get a 40-something. And, you know, meaning no offense to anybody or whatever, it's just a simple reality. Like, the skill set of a 49, 80% old route is pretty drastically different than the skill set of a 55 or something like that. And so I just wanted to make sure, I was like, I need to have a solid base, you know, to jump off from in terms of my, you know, ability to control Samus, my comfort with the game, my understanding of boss fights, stuff like that. And so once I got that, then I got interested in learning about some of the other categories. And, you know, I do jump around a lot, and part of the reason is because I'm a big student of the game. I realize there are certain categories out there like glitched and stuff like that I don't know anything about, but I'm more interested in the no major glitches categories. And so I've made a point to, you know, go in and learn, you know, to be able to run all these runs. And some I've put more time into than others. I mean, like, for example, you're sitting here looking at my stats. You know, my hundo time is, generally speaking, probably the worst of my categories. I've spent the least amount of time on it, but at the same time, you know, I've spent enough time in it to know kind of what I'm doing. You know what I mean? And it was important to me to be able to do that. In particular, I wanted to put emphasis on low ice and RBO, and because I really love the challenge categories. And it's not that any percent hundo aren't challenge categories. It's just like the way the game tests you in those categories stylistically is different, and I find that really fascinating. And so I think it's important to have a broad understanding of the game, and I intend to go back to the philosophy of spending like extensive time on each category and like pushing it to its limit. Like, I ran RBO for like a month, and, you know, I got the 112.03 or whatever, which for me personally, like, I don't really care about anybody else. Like, for me personally, like, that's a really good time for me, and it took me a lot to be able to get that. And so now I'm pushing low ice. I'm going to do it for like a month, maybe two. And then after that, I'm going to go back to any percent, learn new route. I've already started working on it a little bit. And I'm, you know, at minimum, I'm going to be trying to push at least a 44. So I'm going to be doing one thing at a time, but I did want to take some time after that sub 50 to learn other categories. And in terms of the no reset thing, I'm a teacher. You're a teacher too, Moss. I think this is part of the teacher in me, and seeing how students develop over time and remembering that I am also a student. I'm not even talking about Super Metroid. This is just anything. You're just not going to be good at something immediately, unless you're just some kind of true prodigy, which I definitely am not. Like, any kind of skill that I have in this game just comes literally from straight grinding and just working, right? Just hours.
Yeah.
And I take on the idea and philosophy that, like, instead of trying to grind for a PB constantly, I look at the long game, okay? You know, why? Think about how silly it would be to grind for a 53 old route and get all emotional about it and upset and do a bunch of resets if your ultimate goal is to get a 49 anyway, right? Like, if the 53 isn't really your ultimate goal, then it's just a step in the way. Why not continue to practice? Why not continue to do runs? Why not finish runs and get that mentality of understanding how to finish? Like, I really believe understanding how to finish and control your emotions when you're on a good run is actually a skill. And I don't think that's a skill that you're going to develop if you're constantly resetting, and then one run in 15 you made it to lower Norfolk or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I was really big starting off on doing no resets. Now, I'm not saying I never reset, but I don't really feel like it's a good idea to do resets unless you have done enough practice to the point where you are considerably better than your current PB. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you're not currently considerably better than your PB, then it's probably a good idea to continue to practice and worry about that. So, but some people run for fun. They're just relaxing, and PBs come, whatever. That's no problem. For me though, I'm always trying to go as fast as I'm able to go, but I focus on it in the long run instead of the short term, because I just know, like, for example, right now I've got a 44 in low ice, right? Which for me personally is a good time, but at the same time I'm going to continue to work, and you will probably see me do a lot of runs. Like, anybody who watches me, you're probably going to see me do a lot of runs that are like a minute, 2 minutes behind, right? Just because I got behind somewhere, but I'm not going to quit, I just feel like it's really important to finish runs. So for anybody who's new, you can take whatever philosophy you want, but that philosophy has served me really well in terms of improving.
I think it's a good one to remember for everybody. I mean, like, if you're running hundo as an example, and it's at the top, it's between 100 and or an hour 12 to an hour 20. Like, there's so much time. Like, within the first 10 minutes, you're not making or breaking the game, and especially when you're still learning the game. Try to finish runs as much as possible. It's hard sometimes. Like, that's my problem. I just once I get out of the zone, I'm just like, no, let's just start this over again.
Well, and to your point here, like, I want to say one more thing, because I feel like this really puts things into perspective. Okay, like, I don't have a super high opinion of my ability in the game, but at the same time, I don't want to be like falsely modest either. I mean, like, if you look at my times versus the other competition that has ever existed in the game, it's not like I have awful, terrible times, right? I mean, like, I've done enough to have some competitive times in some areas, but every single time I sit down and watch somebody like Overfiend, which I was able to watch his new low ice world record today live. Did you see that, by the way? He ran. No, I didn't. Wow, that's great. He ran a 49. The first 49. But watch Overfiend, watch Zos, watch Behemoth, watch Oates, watch some of these guys that are like watch Fuzda, watch Static. Watch these guys that are operating on a different level, and then you'll see why you are not even close to what you're capable of doing. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, sometimes I watch them and I'm like, see, I don't need to be worried right now about, like, just trying to get like a sick PB or something, because look how wide the gap is between those players and me. Maybe I'll never get to where they are, but I bet I can, get closer to where they currently are than I am now. And so I just feel like that's a good attitude to have.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good advice, Kipp. All right, let's do a quick lightning round of a couple of questions.
All right, cool.
Just quick answers. So what's your your proudest achievement in Super Metroid?
My RBO time. RBO is the, of the four no major glitches categories, it's the least competitive in terms of, like, I can't run a top 5 time in 80%. I'm not even close to that. I can't run a top 5 time in 100%. But I've got a top 5 time in RBO, which I think is cool, and I like that category. Plus, I just feel like that category is just really brutal mentally, and I just kind of like the fact that I, like, just eventually grind it down to whatever I've got. And, if I never run RBO again, and I'm sure that time will get surpassed by a lot of people, but I can still kind of look back on that and be like, I can be proud of that,
Sure. Yeah, it's a great time. What's your favorite category?
My favorite category is low ice.
You're just a masochist.
It's so fun, man. I think the reason is because it's the closest thing to. This is gonna sound weird, but it's the closest thing to NES Metroid. Like, you're just not souped up. You have basic abilities, and you just, the boss fights make it fun for me.
Yeah, So what's your favorite? Do you have a favorite strat maybe in low ice? I'm guessing it's the worst room in the game
Yes,
in low ice.
my favorite strat in the entire game is the low percent ice worst room in the game strat, where you freeze the pirate in the middle of the air and jump on him and then jump up. And I didn't know this until the other day. I was in the middle of a low ice D-Rust run, and Static9 was in there talking to me, and he was like, "Yeah, I invented that strat." I was like, "Are you kidding me?" So that's my favorite strat. I think that one is like super swag.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. Okay, what's your favorite boss fight?
My favorite boss fight is probably Ridley. In every category, in RBO, it's the choke point of the run. In low ice, it's a really fun fight. Even in any percent or hundo, just the style of fighting him is fun.
Perfect segue. Perfect. We'll move. I was gonna ask you what your plans for the future are, but you kind of already touched upon that, and Ridley's what we're talking about tonight. Maybe that's the best way to end the interview. Right?
That sounds good, man. Thank you for interviewing me. I'm basically going to pursue a 53 low ice, and then after that, a 44 and 80%, and that's kind of the goals for the rest of the coming months. But yeah, man, thank you for interviewing me, and we'll cut it over to Ridley here. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to cut it over to True Moss. He's going to be the first one to talk to you about some stuff with Ridley. We're going to try to not only show the traditional old route ways of fighting him, but we're also just going to talk a little bit about some of his mechanics or how he kind of functions, and we'll cover a few ideas from different categories. But anyway, I'm also going to toss it over to you. Take it away, bud.
Okay, great. All right, so Ridley, I posted a little link to the wiki page on Ridley. Basic stuff, 18,000 health. If you're running old any percent, that's 20 shots. If you're running new any percent, that's 60 shots. And then low ice, it's 200 shots, I think. So with the exception of reverse boss order, you're essentially doing more or less the same strats. You're just hitting Ridley with charge shots. Technically, it's faster to, I think it's faster to use supers because supers do double damage, but in most situations, you're going to need your supers moving forward with the exception of low percent ice. With the exception of reverse boss order. So for the most part, in every category except RBO, people are not really supering, usually just using charge shots. I think the most important thing to understand about Ridley is understanding the different patterns that Ridley can do. So the patterns, the way I like to think of the patterns is that you have a pogo pattern where Ridley hops up and down. You have a swooping pattern, and you have a lunge or a bash attack. The bash attack usually happens after the swoop. So the swoop is sort of a U-shape. Ridley moves from one side of the screen to the other, swoops, and generally you jump over Ridley. After a swoop, usually there's a lunge immediately after that. So the first thing I think we should maybe do is I'm just going to turn off all of my weapons except for ice. So this is what you do in low percent ice, but I'm just going to do this for a little while because it's going to help to show a couple of the patterns. I really recommend practicing Ridley with just ice on. If you can get good at beating Ridley with just ice, then all your Ridley fights are easier. I remember I was sweating fighting Ridley in new route any percent, and then I did low percent ice, and I came back, and all of a sudden, new route was free with Ridley. So if you're going to practice Ridley, it's not the worst idea to fight Ridley just with ice to start with. So one of the reasons it's good to use this as an example is that Ridley does not start swooping until Ridley's health is, I believe, below 80%. Now, in old any percent route, that's 4 shots. So essentially, swooping starts almost immediately in old any percent. So we're just going to go to use ice. It's going to take a lot of shots for Ridley to start swooping. This is a really good way to practice working on how to practice pogoing with Ridley. So I'm just going to come in. So the thing with pogoing is you're invincible, or you can't get hit. There's a safe zone on the left side of Ridley over here. So if you can get Ridley to turn around, you're safe over here in this corner. Ridley can't hit you. This is the place where generally you're going to spend your time during a pogo fight. When Ridley jumps up into the air, he'll turn around. If you're on this side, usually what you'll do when Ridley turns around is run under, maybe shoot up once, and then ball back around and try to get Ridley to turn around again. Turning Ridley around does take some practice. The most important thing about trying to turn Ridley around is that you want to jump into the air and you want to break out of spin. It's actually the breaking out of spin that's the thing that generally turns Ridley around. So as you notice, Ridley's not swooping yet. So this is a really good way to practice just continual pogoing patterns. Just practicing working on turning Ridley around is really handy. I usually jump. You kind of want to jump in concert with Ridley. Like you want to jump sort of almost at the same time. You want to be moving up at the same time Ridley's moving up, or actually even a little bit earlier than Ridley moves up. So you notice that I almost kind of jump just before Ridley bounces. So I jump just before Ridley bounces and I break out of spin. And when I break out of spin, that's how I turn Ridley around. So this is just to show how to turn Ridley around. You can do it with shooting. Shooting breaks you out of spin as well. For some reason, Ridley interacts with you differently when you're in spin versus when you're not in spin. So it's a good idea if you're practicing working on pogoing, just trying to practice how to get Ridley to turn around. Just getting used to when to jump. So just as Ridley bounces pretty much is a good time. Then mainly you just want to be on the left side. Let me turn ice back on. So I'll just sort of sit here and show a little bit. I'll shoot once up, jump under, try to turn Ridley around, and then just start unloading ice shots here. When Ridley kind of rises up a little bit and starts to turn, it's when I run underneath. You can usually get 1, maybe 2 shots in. You want to try to avoid the pogo, the tail. And that's essentially all you're going to be doing with the pogoing pattern. You will see the pogo pattern late into the fight as well. So it's good to learn if Ridley's pogoing to the right, learning how to get underneath safely and turning Ridley around is a really important thing. I actually generally will use shot to break out of spin because if you want to, it allows you to start charging your shot back up early. So that way, by the time Ridley's on top of you again, you can already start unleashing shots. So that's more or less it with pogoing. With the pogo, Ridley does shoot fireballs. There's usually only one situation where you're in peril of Ridley right here, actually. That was a perfect timing. So generally, Ridley kind of jumps towards you. Occasionally, I think it depends on your position based, compared to Ridley. Occasionally, so now Ridley's starting the swooping pattern. Occasionally, Ridley will kind of jump backwards away from you. And if you're over on the right side and Ridley's sort of in this area jumping backwards, sort of, back to the left, it's possible that Ridley will hit you with the fireballs. The fireballs do less damage. So in most cases, it's better to just tank the damage. You can screw attack or pseudo screw through the fireballs. But generally, if Ridley's near the middle moving right, you're not going to get hit by the fireballs because they sort of end up hitting the wall on the right side. That's more or less it with pogoing. It is worth noting that you can avoid you pseudo screw through the fireballs. Now, something that's important to notice about the pseudo screw is if you're trying to wall jump, when Ridley's fireballs hit the wall, they sort of explode and they sort of expand outward on the wall. You can see it right there. If you wall jump when the flames are on the wall, often the animation of wall jumping sort of interrupts your pseudo screw, so you can take damage. So you don't really want to wall jump like that. You don't really want to wall jump when the flames are on the wall. That's a little thing, but it's something worth noting. Kipp, do you want to take over and talk a little bit about swooping patterns, maybe?
Yeah, that's fine. Let me swap over here real quick. Okay, so basically, let me see if I can get rid of this. Okay, so I've got it set up right here where I'm about to enter the. Sorry about that, Melon. I'm about to enter the Ridley room, and I've got what I want to show is actually a couple things. I've got the old route stuff set up here, okay, and what I'm going to talk about is I'm just going to get him into this pattern where he is past, I think you said 4 shots, get him into the point where he can swoop, right?
Well, it's 80%. So
yeah, so
80%. Yeah, so 4 shots would be 20%.
Okay, so I'm gonna just kind of stand here and fight him for a minute, but I'm not gonna shoot him just yet. Basically, as Moss pointed out, you've got these, you've got basically these swooping patterns and you have these pogo patterns. And what I try to use as a visual cue for the swoops are these 2 pillars right here. All right, you see this visual cue. Actually, you know what? Tell you what, let me kill him real quick, and then I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about. But as Moss was going over, it's pretty easy to hit him when he's pogoing. You just kind of want to get used to going underneath him and trying to turn him around, because this is, about as free as it gets for Ridley. If you know how to position yourself, you just get to fire up at him over and over again. Although I will...
Pogoing is, with charge shots, pogoing is generally slower than this. If you can get into a fight where Ridley just swoops and lunges essentially the entire fight,
right,
and that is generally faster because you don't lose time in ball form trying to go under Ridley, trying to turn Ridley around.
Right.
So it is generally faster to only get swoops, but it's safer.
Yeah,
to get.
That's what I mean by free. Basically, it's really hard to. I mean, you can miss shots, technically with the beams, but it's kind of hard to make a mistake if you're already in the right position, because you literally just stand there and press up and then hold your charge. So this is sort of like the safest method in terms of if he's pogoing, just get over here and get as many shots as you can. But the main thing I want to show here is my visual cue when I fight Ridley are these 2 columns in the background. Okay, so you've got this column right here and this column right here. And generally speaking, with plasma and wave, you'll notice that your beam, if you watch me shoot up, it's actually got a pretty wide hitbox, okay? And that's a good thing, but it's also can be tricky because if it's too wide and it hits his tail in the wrong position, the tail will block the shot. So, long story short, I try to use these and I try to shoot up and let him go underneath me. If you jump at the right time, he won't hit you. But the key is you also have to be comfortable with shooting and jumping at the same time, because sometimes he's going to be all the way up here, and if you shoot, the beam won't register a hit on him unless you have him. He doesn't necessarily have to be on the screen, but he has to be enough in the screen, so to speak. You'll notice in other rooms when you shoot shots, sometimes you can hit things that are not that you can't see. Sometimes it happens with doors, things like that. Yeah, it's like hero shot. So basically, you shoot it and you jump, and when he's pogoing, when you have high jump boots, when he's swooping, you basically just kind of shoot and immediately start charging again. You'll notice that I shoot and I'm already charging, and I have a second shot by the time I reach the peak of my jump. And usually when he swoops, you can get a third shot. So sometimes you can get 4 or 5, 6 shots per cycle, depending on how it goes. So, yeah, the action box range. There you go, Seppi. So that's just one thing to remember. When you're in old route or hundo, you've got plasma, but you also have high jump boots. And if you learn sort of the feel for the timing of it, you can jump over it. But I'm going to cover something real quick that I think is very applicable to everybody, but in particular if you're a new runner, okay? If you're a new runner, and in particular, if you're coming in here with extra E-tanks, if you're still getting fire flea, if you come in this room with, 5 E-tanks or something like that, the main thing to remember is make every charge shot count. If you're going to mistime some jumps, you're going to get hit, he's going to do some weird things. Just accept that you're going to get hit, but don't give up on your shot, because you should have enough health to where if you're still, being consistent with your shots, you should be able to kill him just about every time, okay? So I'm just going to fight him a couple times, and I'm going to see if I can get some swoops. and you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about. So I'll just kind of talk through, what he's doing when he's doing it. All right, like I got hit there, no problem. Looks like he was heading towards me. Okay, yeah, that's a weird pattern. All right, he's pogoing. Let me see if I can get him to fly away. I don't want to do any damage to him while he's doing this. This is another thing. Just like literally like loading up a save state or whatever and just practicing moving can sometimes be helpful. I'm just going to have him pick me up so that he'll start swooping it again, hopefully. Good God, Ridley. Please, dude.
I think you need to do one more damage.
I see.
I think you're at.
Yeah.
You have to be under 80%.
I completely forgot that I actually needed to hit him. Okay. So he's in his pogo phase, but now he's swooping. Okay, so sometimes he's going to do like those shallow swoops, and it's hard for you to get over them. But a lot of times you're just basically doing these hero shots, and you're trying to shoot near these pillars. Okay, you'll notice that I'm a little too far to the inside on some of these, but the key is that you want to be as close as you can to hitting him, but you don't want to be too deep because all you're going to do is end up hitting his tail. So let me try again and try to get more of a full fight. Also keep in mind, one mechanism that a lot of newer players don't remember is that if you crouch jump, you actually jump higher. So it is possible for you to make it over some of his swoops by utilizing that crouch jump. All right, so now he's pogoing, so I'm just going to stand still. All right, he's flown away. I've done a hero shot. You can tell that one registered. I got a second one in, a third one, a fourth one. Got blocked by the tail. I can usually get another one before he swoops back down. Notice that I'm still like sometimes getting hit, but I'm okay with it because I've got plenty of health. And I could just sit here and do this all day. You know what I'm saying? Like, that wasn't perfect, but you kind of get the idea. Like, for every swoop that he does, you can get in 3 or 4 shots if you're constantly charging your beam. So that's just one thing to keep in mind for the swoops. Practice jumping at the right rhythms while still holding your shot button, and depending on your button combination, it could be different. And then also just realize that if you find yourself in a bit of an awkward position, you can crouch and jump and get higher, which can be very helpful. All right, Moss, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I've sort of just set Ridley up into a position where Ridley's now can start swooping. One thing that's interesting about Ridley's swooping patterns is that the first swoop is kind of different. Dingus has already kind of mentioned it. Listen to Dingus. Dingus really knows what he's talking about.
Indeed.
So Ridley's first swoop is is a lot higher. Ridley tends to go up a lot higher, and it is a little bit harder to avoid. Something else that's interesting about Ridley's first swoop is that sometimes Ridley will do what I call a fast swoop on the first, like after pogoing. Most of the time, Ridley will move up to the top and wait for a little while before he starts swooping. But occasionally, he'll do a fast one. So one thing that you can do if you want to be safe, let's actually load some health back in, is after pogoing, when you notice that Ridley's going to start swooping, let me get Ridley into pogoing. Can? All right. Okay. So I'm just going to wait for Ridley. So once Ridley goes back to a swooping pattern, I'm just going to stand here, start shooting. One thing you can do on the first one is you can just, if you want to play it safe, is you can just wall jump up on the opposite wall from where Ridley is currently. This has been a bad pogo fight. All right. Okay. Oh, no, still. So it's good to start learning, like if you turn around in the pogo, you know that you have to get quickly to the other side. So turn around again. Fortunately, Ridley's not doing a swoop. But you will be able to notice once Ridley starts flying upward, that, man. So again, just good pogo exercise. Jumping into the air, turning around with a shot. You can also use angle or up or anything that breaks you out of spin effectively. Ridley, please.
I think Ridley, please is possibly one of the most said things in Super Metroid history.
Anyways, it's good example. It's still good to show pogoing anyways. So you notice I'm just getting I'm playing it pretty safe. You don't want to die to Ridley is the thing. Okay, here we go. So I'll just jump up onto this wall and I'll just coast here for a little while. Once I see Ridley going down, it's a good way. It's just a really safe way of doing it. The riskier way to do it is to, as soon as Ridley starts heading up, is to run over to the column immediately. Like, well, again, we'll see if Ridley ever does a swoop. Is to run over to the column and do a hero shot immediately. So again, I'm just kind of reading Ridley, waiting for, watching for turnarounds versus flying up quickly. And so still, this has been a lot of pogos. Typically, I don't tend to see Ridley pogoing this much, but in RBO, you want more pogos generally. It's just safer. And in fact, generally for DPS, you get more shots off with the supers when you're doing a Ridley fight. Anyways, Ridley's not cooperating. This is a perfect example of Ridley just doesn't do what you want it to do. Okay, so this is like the sort of what a lot of people will do is they'll take one shot and then a second shot. So I kind of did two shots. I went one and tried to catch him right away, and then a second one to jump over. It's a little risky though, because if Ridley does decide to do the fast swoop, like I said, it doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen sometimes. You can get hit with that fast swoop. Once Ridley's into his swooping pattern, you can sort of often just keep Ridley in that pattern. So like Kipp was saying, just using the columns as references, I'm trying to get 4 shots per swoop and lunge pattern. So jump up, angle down and shoot, jump up, hit Ridley here. And you notice that if you're kind of doing your timing right, it's often easy to just sort of propagate this to continue over and over again. In any percent, this is the fastest way to fight Ridley if you can keep it consistent. But it doesn't always happen. You have to sort of start getting good at noticing when Ridley's going to go up to do another swoop. So I could tell there that Ridley was not going to swoop one more time because Ridley didn't sort of fly up. Ridley kind of tends to hover in the middle of the room after a lunge. So this is the riskier strat. 1 shot, 2 shots, jump over. It's going up, so he's going to lunge again. And then after lunge, lunge after a swoop, and then he kind of just waited there, so I knew another pogo was happening. For really new players, it's also good to note that like Ridley is the one boss where you're not going to be able to farm your health back up. So whatever health you have coming in, it's what you got.
Yeah, when you get done showing whatever, what you're working on, I actually want to kind of mention a philosophical thing about what you just mentioned, because I think it's very important that newer players, kind of understand the mentality.
You can start doing it, sure.
Yeah. So let me, kind of back to what we were talking about earlier. Y'all could tell from my interview that I'm really big on sort of taking a philosophical approach to all things in the game. And if your goal is to get better at the game, especially when you're first starting, I'm talking like, you don't even necessarily have a sub-hour time or something like that, I think it would be in your best interest to spend a lot of time on Ridley. Like, the reason is because Ridley is in terms of old route, and especially if we're talking to like, from an hour and 15-minute PB to like, I don't know, a low 50 or something. Not like the super, super top, like, people going for a 44 or 45 or something like that. Ridley is one of those bosses that when you first start, it can actually be really difficult. And I see a lot of people die to him, and I died to him a lot when I first started. He's a run killer. And on top of that, it's a travesty because he's near the end, right? And so, number one, I think it's a good idea to get familiar with him so that you go in confident that you can take care of business and you can finish as many runs as possible. But secondly, it's also good at teaching some level of control of your character. Even though you're only in one room, being able to manipulate your character to jump over a moving target, to constantly be charging shots, to, turn into a ball, roll, turn him around, get to a very specific place and stand still, and knowing how to be calm during all those things. This is a really good way to teach that. In fact, I have a kind of a funny story. I ran this game with a different control layout than I currently use, and I did it all the way to the point where I got my first sub 50 time. And I remember the first full run that I did where I changed controls, it was really awkward and tough, but the hardest part was Ridley. Like when I got to Ridley, I just realized like my brain has to retrain itself. So I ended up, after that run, spending like 2 hours that night, like just literally just loading Ridley over and over again and just fighting him over and over and over again until I got comfortable. And that ended up helping me to get more accustomed to the controls that I was switching to. And I think it'd be the same for anybody. I think if you just spend a lot of time fighting him and understanding his patterns, you would kind of like gain two different skills. You would gain the skill of learning how to fight him better, but at the end you would have a tighter control, of Samus than you did when you first started. And so I really recommend highly that people understand that in this game, you're not just going to get better overnight. You have to really put in a lot of time on individual aspects. But sometimes individual aspects can have benefits in other areas of the game. So I think the Ridley fight is one of those that can really help newer players. So real quick, one other thing I want to kind of point out, there's different methods of doing the start, but True Moss mentioned the idea of supers, and I've got this loaded with 20 supers because I want to make a point about like Hundo or GT Classic, okay? And this is kind of up for debate, but notice that like, when Ridley first comes out, if you're doing a sort of the easy traditional way, you can basically get like 2 shots in him before he flies off the screen. That's 1,800 damage, right? But if you were to use supers, they fire faster than a charge shot, and while they do less damage individually, each one is 600 versus 900 charge shot with a fully powered beam, you can fire them faster and do more damage. And so if you're in a Hundo run or something like GT Classic where you enter with like 19 or 20 missiles, one thing I've been doing is I've been starting the fight with 6 supers, which is essentially 4 charge shots. So I usually position myself right around here. He'll come out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I immediately cut off and I start charging my shots. Now, there's really no debate about it. It's faster. I was able to do 4 charge shots worth of damage in the time that he flew away, as opposed to probably releasing my 3rd shot in the traditional way. Now, there are technically other ways that you could like manipulate your charges to get a few more in by this point. Like if some of the really elite players will like charge and jump and release one right at the start of the fight and hit him perfectly. But it's just one thing to keep in mind that the supers will do more damage if you're running categories where you can utilize them. I do not recommend using supers in like old route, especially if you're running with 10 supers, because you're not guaranteed to get drops. You don't want to stop at the ship. I could go on and on. You want to kind of save those for Torian later, typically.
Yeah, you're going to want those supers in old.
But if you're running Hundo or something, especially if you get him like let me just fight him for a second. Yeah, if you get him to the point where he's pogoing and you have some supers to burn in a category, I mean, you can just knock these things out, dude. Like that's a lot. That's a lot of damage, right? That's way more damage than I could have done with charge shots alone. So anyway, long story short, supers are very powerful. They don't have to just be utilized in a category like RBO, but I wouldn't recommend using them in old route in particular, just because there's other reasons you wouldn't want to do it. But you kind of get the idea. Just understand that supers are very powerful versus Ridley, as opposed to they only do 300 damage to Mother Brain or something like that. All right, cool. I'm also going to toss it back to you, bud.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So we've kind of talked about all the different patterns at this point. I'm just going to maybe I'll just restart this room and I'll put on we'll just do old route for now, and we'll just talk about how to like a basic setup for the beginning. There's a couple of ways to set up the beginning so that you can get some good shots in. I try to get 6 charge shots in at the beginning of the fight. Yeah, I think I got all this on. Okay. So if you're going for the charge shot strat, there is a kind of a good setup to start the fight. I shot a little early there. You want to kind of shoot your first charge shot just as Ridley starts to kind of fade in. So you can get usually 2 shots here before Ridley flies away. I come to this spot right here, just right of the pillar, and I shoot another charge shot straight up, and I sort of hero shot. So I jump up following it. So 1, 2, shoot up, and I jump, and I kind of move to the right. Now, this doesn't work always, but generally it's a strat that I use in order to make Ridley kind of swoop around me. Sort of like this. Okay, so you actually, and then I try to hit Ridley with a 4th shot. So as I jump up for the hero shot this way, I then try to hit Ridley with a 4th shot on my way down. So that's the first 4 shots.
Hey.
Sometimes Ridley...
I'm sorry, Moss. I don't mean to interrupt you, but can we try something real quick? You're starting to lag really hard in my Discord. I'm gonna put the screen on me for a second, and let's leave the call and reload Discord and try to call back and see if that see if that fixes it. Sorry about that, everybody. I know that can be kind of annoying, but sometimes it just depends. Sometimes Discord has issues. Sometimes he can't even hear me. But hopefully maybe reloading it will fix the issue. I think it would be better to reload it now than to keep looking at the sort of slideshow, the PowerPoint, if you will. All right, let me get him back on the line here. Lag reduction strats.
Yo.
All right, let's try it again. See if you can share your screen with me. I don't know if it's going to fix it, but yeah, that appears to be much better. So let's go from there and see if it works better.
So let's try that one more time. So 2 charge shots right at the beginning before Ridley flies up. Another charge shot just right of the column. I come over and try to shoot another one. And then as I come down, I kind of head to the left. And so you're kind of trying to manipulate Ridley to sort of move in a circle around you. By doing that, you can often get up to 6 shots before Ridley starts going into a pogo pattern, pardon me. 3, 4, come around, 5, and then 1 right here, maybe even a 7th one there. So that's 7 shots already. And then fortunately, sometimes you will get into a pogo pattern right there. If you're lucky, you'll get into a swoop pattern, and then you can continue that way. Let's just try that a couple more times. Sometimes, just based off of where you are versus where Ridley is, Ridley might not go for the bait and start pogoing. And you can see it right there. I could kind of tell as I was up in the air that Ridley was made a little lurch upwards and then started coming down at pretty much the same speed I was coming down. So I knew that there was a pogo coming. And if that happens, it's, just ball up and try to go under Ridley and start your pogo strats. 3. So that was kind of a weird one. Though you might find that sometimes the starting is a little inconsistent. It's like I said, it kind of just depends. The opening is kind of interesting. Sometimes Ridley just doesn't want to play ball, and it's something you'll notice Zos talks about a little bit with the beginning of Ridley when he has a strat at the beginning with X factors. Zenny was talking a bit about it because he's been fighting Ridley with RBO, and you have to kind of hope for a good start with Ridley, but sometimes Ridley just doesn't want to play.
Yeah, Ridley has a nickname that I'm not going to repeat here. But
I think most of us know.
Yeah, and there's a very, very good reason for that nickname. I promise you'll see it even if you just run old route, but if you run any other category like RBO or something where you really need him to behave, you will understand that sometimes he just doesn't want to.
Yeah. We haven't talked about counting yet. And counting, if you're learning Ridley for first time, counting your shots is very important. You want to know when you've hit Ridley for the 20th time or the 60th time or the 200th time, whichever number you need in order to beat Ridley for the category you're running. Ridley doesn't die immediately when you get down to 0 health necessarily. Sometimes he does, but the best way to kill Ridley is get his health down to 0 and then actually let Ridley grab you and pick you up. And that's the most stable way to end the fight. But you have to know how many shots you've landed, and you have to know where you're at in the count. Ridley turns a different shade, turns sort of redder after 50%. Not at 50%, but after 50%. So with 20 shots, after 11 shots, Ridley changes colors. So either you count to 20 and on the 11th shot, I like to make sure that I see Ridley change color to make sure I know what number I'm on. If I lose count in the first half, I just wait until I see Ridley turn red, and then I count 9 shots after that. It's good to play it safe. Sometimes you don't know. Like if you do a hero shot, you may hit Ridley, but you don't know because you sort of scroll off screen, and so you're not certain. It's better to do a safety at the end if you're not certain that you landed all of them. It's good to do a safety, get 21 shots, and then let Ridley grab you. The easiest time to let Ridley grab you is after a swoop. Normally there's a lunge after a swoop, but after the swoop, if his life is at 0, that's usually the place where it's best to try to let him grab you. If Ridley's on the right, so if Ridley started over here and swooped down and over this way, so now is on the right side, I usually ball up somewhere around this pillar. The easiest way is probably to ball up around this pillar, and usually Ridley will grab you if his tail doesn't get in the way. You have to kind of be lucky. Sometimes you can take damage first from a flame that Ridley shoots at you and then get grabbed. But essentially count to 20 and then hope he grabs you. So we'll count on 1, 2, 3. Nope. 3. Turn him around. Keep counting 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Nope. 8, that's a riskier strat. 9, 10, take the damage. 11, change color. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So after the swoop here, that's 20. After the swoop, Ridley can pick you up. You can, in fact, shoot Ridley. So if you're at 19 shots after the swoop, in that next lunge, you can hit Ridley before he grabs you, and it will still work. You can basically shoot Ridley with the 20th shot right up to the moment that Ridley grabs you. That's the safest way. The worst thing that can happen is you get to 20 shots and Ridley's just started pogoing, because then you have to wait for Ridley to stop pogoing, to move up, do a swoop, and then try to grab you. There is a strat to get grabbed by Ridley when you're pogoing. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's actually a really good one to learn if you're trying to bring your time down. It's actually not that hard in most situations, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Anything else really, Kipp? Aside anything else that I'm missing at this point?
I'm really excited that you mentioned getting grabbed or whatever, like while he's pogoing, because I think that's very important. And actually, I messed that up a lot, so I'm looking forward to seeing what you say about that. But if you don't mind, since we're talking about counts and like him dying, I just want to cover one quick thing about low percent ice, in case anybody runs it in the future. Let me explain something to everybody about low percent ice real quick. I'm gonna set up my equipment to only have 10 missiles and 10 supers, because that's what you would have in a low percent fight. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get Ridley to half health, and I want you guys to notice, like, I'm going to do 10 charge shots to him, right, which is basically like half the damage, and then I'm going to show you kind of how to approach the second half of the fight. So that's 4, 5, 6. 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so real quick, let me turn off my other beams. Okay, so he's literally at half damage, okay? Like, you've done 9,000 of the required 8,000, and actually, I'm going to spend the rest of this fight without the extra stuff too, okay? So he's at half, but notice he's still purple. Now, unless I'm mistaken, I believe that he will not turn pink until he is at literally like at least 1 health below halfway. So right now he's exactly at 50% health, but he's still purple. So when I shoot him with my next shot, it should turn him pink, right? Boom. Okay, notice that he is now pink or red, okay? This means that he is now under 50% health. That means he has, less than 9,000 health, right? And so in low percent, whether it's speed or ice, I'm going to show you just a quick thing to remember that makes this portion of the fight a lot easier to manage, especially at first. A lot of times I see people making what I would call a mistake with their ammo, and I can't tell you for sure that this is the single most optimal way to do this, but it definitely works, and it's a solid technique. It's just understanding how to utilize your ammo in conjunction with information. Basically, you never want to fire a super or your regular missiles until Ridley is in this pink state, okay? And the reason for that is because if you fire them all at the beginning and then you lose count of how many shots you've hit him with, then you don't really know how many charge shots you need, or it can be more tricky. Plus, he starts to become faster the lower in health that he has. So there's like a 50% threshold, maybe like a 70 and an 80 or something. I don't remember what all the thresholds are, but there's multiple different ones for speed. And so we want to unload our ammo during the portion of the fight that's the most dangerous, where he's moving the most sporadically and the fastest. That is not at the beginning, that's at the end, right? So 10 supers is going to do 6,000 of the 9,000 damage remaining, which is 2/3. The regular missiles, if you have 10, are going to do another 1,000. So you only are required to get 2,000 damage on him from your beam before you kill him once he turns pink. So usually that translates to, I think, 23 charged ice shots plus the ammo, right? But the key here is, okay, thank you, Moss. You don't necessarily have to unload them all at the very end, but I usually hold the supers until the end. So a lot of times, like once I see that he's pink, I'm counting. I think that's like my second or third one, right? I'm just going to keep fighting him. He's still swooping. I'm just going to save these missiles until he pogos me. And the next time he pogos me, or the first time that he pogos me while he's pink, I'm going to unload all of my regular missiles. I can't quite get him into a... Notice I just utilized the crouch jump right there. I can't quite get him to pogo. Let's see if I can get him down here. So earlier he wanted to pogo a ton. All right, there. I think I ruined it, yeah.
This is actually perfect. This is showing how...
You're right. This is Ridley.
You generally want him to swoop, but like when you see him when you want him to pogo, he won't pogo. Like that's, we're just showing you how it's like. Both of us have had this tonight.
Right. So notice that now that I got him into this position over here to the left, the first time I got him there, I went ahead and unloaded all my regular missiles. And so I'm just going to keep popping him, with all this damage or whatever, until I get him to that 6,000 threshold, which I think we're like 4 or 5 shots away, right? And I'm just going to tank some damage here just to kind of show you, right? So cool. Now he's in range. I know I've done all the damage. I get him to turn around. And at this point, I just try to unload all the supers all at once. This bypasses his most dangerous phase where he's going super fast. So you can basically shut down, the last 1/3 of his entire life with the 10 supers in a category like that. So that's a really important thing to remember. Hold your ammo. Wait for him to turn pink. You can go ahead and unload the regular missiles as early as you can whenever he's pogoing. I would recommend only doing that when he's pogoing as opposed to trying to do it when he's swooping. It's harder. But then hold off on those supers until you have him in an advantageous position. You can finish the fight out. So understanding how much health he has and the different ranges for the types of beams you have, True Moss, you could talk more about even New Route, for example. 60 charge shots, but I'm sure y'all utilize the supers. You get the idea. So, all right, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, I think the way I like to think of Ridley, RBO is a different situation compared to the other categories fighting Ridley. But the way I try to look at Ridley is that I never want to die to Ridley. I would rather Ridley, I survive Ridley and the fight's a little bit slower, and then I choose to start the run over. In other words, I like to decide that the run is over rather than letting Ridley decide that the run is over. And so learning how to do safety strats, learning how to avoid Ridley as much as possible, dialing it back and not being over ambitious and trying to land as many shots as quickly as possible In RBO, it's a little bit different. You have to. But in the other categories, you obviously want to get a good Ridley time. But if you're looking at old any percent route, 20 shots, even if things go pretty badly, generally there won't be a very large window of difference between a good Ridley fight and a bad Ridley fight, relatively speaking, compared to, Fantoon, things go wrong because of RNG and it's just like, well, it's a slow fight now. But Ridley, as long as you are pretty good at landing charge shots, your time won't probably vary too much, as long as you don't die. And then the run's over. So the way I try to think of it is, survive Ridley and then make the decision whether or not you want to keep the run going. But don't let Ridley destroy your run. RBO is different, though. Ridley destroys every run of RBO. So if you make it that far. Well, I think we should talk about this getting grab thing, maybe. So I said before, the easiest time to get grabbed by Ridley when he's at 0 health is by waiting for a swoop and then balling up or just standing under him and getting grabbed. But the problem with that is you then would have to wait through a pogo pattern. But there is a way to get grabbed, like I just did, during a pogo pattern. And there's a couple of things you need to understand. So I've sort of saved here with Ridley at 19 shots right before a pogo pattern starts. So I'm just going to hit him with one shot. And then the idea is you have to try to jump into Ridley's claws, but you don't want to do a spin jump. I said earlier when I was talking about getting Ridley to turn around during pogoing that spin jumps don't usually affect him for turning around. You have to break out a spin by shot or angle or aiming up. You have to break out a spin. For some reason, Ridley treats spin jumps differently. If you try to spin jump into Ridley's claws, often what happens is Ridley will actually start a new pattern, like go back into a whole new cycle. So you want to avoid spin jumping. You want to do a straight jump. I do a straight jump. I kind of jump and push diagonally in the direction towards Ridley. So if Ridley's to my right, I jump and push upright. That's just something that I find stabler. You can probably just push right after you jump, but I always jump straight up. And then just after I've jumped, I push towards Ridley. The timing on the jump is really important. You want to get grabbed by Ridley right at the apex of the pogo jump. So right at the very top of the pogo, that's the moment you want to be grabbed. So what I use as a reference is I try to jump pretty much right when Ridley hits the ground for a pogo. So as Ridley's tail hits the ground and he starts moving up, at that moment, that's when I jump into Ridley's arms. So let's see if I can do this. So I'm going to turn him around. Let's do it one more time. I'm going to turn him around. Okay, so one shot. So you notice I jumped pretty much the exact same time that Ridley's tail hit the ground, maybe just afterwards. You don't want to, generally I find if you go beforehand, if you go before Ridley hits the ground, it's probably not going to work. But let's see. Let's see if that actually is true. Oh, that was at the same time. It's hard for me not to go early, actually, because my muscle memory is I know when I'm supposed to jump, so I'm automatically doing it that way. It still works. You want to be close to, like I was just before he hit the ground. You want to be pretty close to the time where Ridley hits the ground. That way, the two of you are kind of moving up at the same time. What you don't want to do is jump, as he's already halfway up, essentially. Jump into his arms. So romantic. Exactly. So you can do this on the left side. You can do it on the right as well. It's usually easier on the left because you can just stand there and wait. One of the tricky things about being on the left, though, sometimes, not often, but sometimes when you're standing over here, instead of jumping straight up and down on you, Ridley will sort of start jumping left to right a little bit. And it's very hard to jump into Ridley's arms when he's jumping backwards. Oops. Well, that messed up. Now, the interesting thing is after the pogo pattern ended, Ridley goes straight into trying to grab you. So you may not get it every single time. There you go. So I jump and then push forward. That usually tends to work. If you're facing the other direction, it also works. So if you're facing left, same idea. Oops. still worked. I took damage that time, but it will still work. Let's try doing it from the other side. Let's see if I can manipulate him over to the other side. Oops. See if I can get one shot in. Yeah, so it still works. It's harder on the right side because you don't have a safe spot to kind of wait. You have to kind of do the shot quickly, and then on the very next bounce, jump upward. But it does save a lot of time if you get good at it. It's definitely worth practicing.
And to your point, Moss, I mean, you've mentioned it already, but just as a reminder to everybody, basically the right side of the room for Ridley is bad for everything. Yeah, stay on the left. That's the safe spot.
The only other thing I can think about being on the left kind of depends on which beam you're using, and if you're using Moonwalk. So if you're not using Moonwalk, most people just face left here. I don't know if this is actually true or if this is just my belief, but I find when I'm facing left on this edge of the platform when Ridley's pogoing, my charge shots usually don't get affected by Ridley's tail. But sometimes when I'm facing right, maybe if I'm just a little bit too far towards Ridley, if you shoot upward, your shot can actually get hit by Ridley's tail. So one thing that I do is if Ridley's jumping up, I kind of jump up with Ridley and shoot sort of like this. When Ridley's coming down towards me, I stand still. Take some practice, but it's just something to be aware of as you move forward. What else we got? Anything else?
I think that's probably going to do it for Ridley. We can now move into the Q&A session for a few minutes before we wrap it up. If anybody has any specific questions. By the way, thank you again, Moss. You did an excellent job, as always, of covering a wide range of things. And thank you. And, yeah, so, guys, if anybody has any specific questions, we're willing to, for a few minutes here, sit and go through a few strats if anybody has any specific questions. We also want to encourage you to, tell us any strats in the future that you want us to prepare for or any episodes that you would be interested in us covering. But, yeah, we kind of want to give at least a few minutes dedicated to answering any kind of in-the-moment questions for people. So if you have anything, let us know. Otherwise, I believe I'll sit here and talk about future episodes for a moment. We've covered pretty much all of Old Route in terms of like ammo management and certain strats. We haven't done like a full tutorial, but we've covered all the bosses at this point, other than Mother Brain. But we will cover Mother Brain, but in Old Route it's not really a huge deal. Thank you, Peach. But in the future we have other people lined up to come on to the show. Topsy Turv will be coming on at some point in the near future. We haven't planned out exactly what day everybody's going to come yet, but we've got Topsy Turv coming in. Z Music is another person in the past that agreed to come on. Sephi, who Antinomy, I don't know if he's still in here, is another thing that is another guest that we're going to have. And I believe Matrick, wants to come on too. We'll have him on. And I'll be reaching out to a lot of other people to be guests. So, all right, here's a question. What is the best way to use power bombs? Probably mostly used in randos. In randomizers, sometimes you never find bombs. So power bombs are, really important in terms of like they replace your bombs. And there's a lot of places in the game, that you have to have some kind of regular bomb to get through. So my suggestion, Tracy, for you would be, if you enjoy doing randos, I'd become very familiar with where you can get powerbomb drops. Meaning, like, there are certain rooms where enemies have, like, a 99% chance to drop powerbombs. Like right now in the room next to Ridley. Like, I'll just give an example. Not that this would necessarily come up in a rando. I mean, it could, but these little, I call them fuzzy butts. These little orb guys drop power bombs like 99%. Like right now, they're not going to drop. That one didn't drop one because I was full on power bombs, but as you can see, I got 2 drops here. Fire fleas have a 99% chance to drop them. So fire fleas are not just here in Lower Norfair. There are other places like in Brinstar, near in Green Brinstar, the first place you come down, there's a room to the left, I think, that has some. So I would just familiarize yourself with which enemies drop power bombs and constantly, be cognizant in a rando of, trying to stay as close to maximum as you can so you don't get soft locked in certain spots. That was something I had to learn.
Kipp, I think Tracy's actually is mentioning it's for Ridley. I think Tracy's asking what's the best way to use power bombs with.
I got you. Okay, good question. Well, even what I just said about power bombs with randos is still applicable. But yeah, so power bombs actually function in a really strange way. I'm going to approach this from the low percent ice perspective real quick. Let me show you a couple things here. This is actually probably going to be a little bit of a complex answer, but a special beam attack, an SBA, is something in the game where you use a charge shot while having power bombs equipped, but you can only have one particular beam equipped, like Ice Beam by itself or Wave Beam by itself or whatever. Wave Beam and Ice are the two most common ones. You don't see a lot of strats in normal speed runs where a special beam attack with Spazer or Plasma is used. But for example, in low percent ice, if you charge your shot to get this special beam attack with ice as you enter the room, you can stand here, and that's going to be 4 charge shots that are going to hit Ridley before he comes out, to fight. And so a lot of the special beam attacks against Ridley are utilized literally like holding a charge as you enter the room. So
same thing works for X factoring too. If you're doing depending on the category, you can use
right. So let me show that one real quick. I accidentally didn't do the save state correctly, but let's try an X factor real quick. If you have just wave equipped and you have your power bomb selected, I'm gonna do a save state right here. Then as soon as you enter the room, if you position yourself on this third block and let it pass through you twice, then all 4 of them should hit Ridley. And that's going to be 1,200 damage because each one is, 300 damage or whatever. So
you want to start your charge shot when you first come into the room. So you don't want to have a charge shot held before
exactly.
You come in. It's also good to note that if you come into the room in spin jump, if you hold the shot, if you're going through the door and you start buffering the shot when you come in the door, it doesn't necessarily charge. You have to break out a spin separately.
Right.
So watch out for if you're coming through with spin.
And see, this whole thing about pogoing Ridley is going to be really helpful in randomizers because a lot of times you'll get to Ridley and you don't have charge beam, but you'll be looking for that kind of 30 super threshold. But if you happen to enter here with charge beam and wave, that's a really good way to start a fight. This is the kind of traditional opener for RBO too. Sometimes people can do 2, 3, 4 X factors in a row, and really that's actually something I'm not very good at. And the only way I would have utilized it would have been RBO, and it's just for the level of consistency that I had with it. It was more trouble than it was worth for me because I would just basically lose my run. So I came up with a different method where I just start off with 1 X factor. And then just shoot him. Whoops, I moved a little too quickly there. And basically after I get the X Factor, I start shooting supers. But another thing to keep in mind is that these power bombs, he doesn't want to get near them. You'll notice that it changes his behavior. Once you drop a power bomb, he tries to avoid it if he can. And sometimes he'll go down, sometimes he'll go up. You can actually get a double hit if it goes off in the right place. That one only hit him one time. You can tell it hit him one time because he's flashing. But every time it hits him, it does 200 damage. So, for example, at the start of a low percent ice fight, a lot of times people will get this special beam attack, and then they'll drop a power bomb. And what I do in my runs is I actually try to drop them all at the start, and I'll just do these wall jumps over and over, and I'll try to get it to where they can possibly double hit. And then after I'm done with that is when I'll start trying to do charge shots. Now, technically, that's not the most advanced method, but I just find that sometimes if I do it in the middle of a fight, it makes them act really strange. And in low percent, you don't want to get hit. So I found that to be more consistent for me personally. But hopefully that answered your question.
One of the more common places to do power bombs as well in that fight is after a swoop when Ridley goes into the lunge pattern. That's often a place that people will sometimes lay power bombs. I see Zos doing that quite a bit.
Yeah, good point. That's a great question, though. Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, at this point, I think this is going to be a really good place for us to wrap it up. So, guys, thank y'all so much for coming in. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll have our little outro. Moss, once again, thanks to you, man. I'll put the little, I'll put your screen back up so you can say goodnight to everybody and whatnot. But thank you for coming on the show again and, interviewing me this time. I had a lot of fun answering your questions.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it was great. Good night, everybody. Thanks so much for hanging out, and we'll hope to see you again in 2 weeks' time. I don't know. We got to think about what the future holds. I kind of want to talk about some Hundo strats in the next.
Ooh, I think that'd be great because Hundo is the sort of second most ran category in Super Metroid. There's a lot of people out there. Any percent is sort of like the standard or whatever, but there's a lot of people who've put a lot of emphasis on Hundo like exclusively, and I think that pretty much everybody runs Hundo at some point or another. So I think that'd be a great idea.
Yeah, it's interesting with Hundo that like there is two routes for Hundo, but most of the stuff is pretty much the same. There's like one or two things that are a little bit different. Obviously, you have to get grapple at a different time in the late croc strats, but most of the stuff you do, like most of the rooms are almost exactly the same. And so if you ever, it like all the strats we talk about in Hundo will pretty much apply to both ways of running Hundo.
Cool.
So it's
we'll talk offline and we'll talk off stream and we'll put it together. But yeah, thanks, man, and good night, everybody. We appreciate you guys coming in, and we hope that some of this has been helpful in some way. We're gonna play it out now, and we will see you next time for episode number 10 of Strat Chat. Have a great night.
Good night, everybody.